MDM Tan changed outfits several times in front of the mirror. With her only daughter Li Ying's wedding fast approaching, her heart bloomed like the spring haze. It was the day her precious treasure, her daughter whom she adored, would meet a wonderful groom and pledge a lifetime together. It would be the most radiant moment in MDM Tan's life. The wedding preparations had gone smoothly. Complicated matters like the newlywed home, betrothal gifts, and dowry were resolved without major conflict, thanks to the thoughtfulness of the groom's family and Li Ying's straightforward personality. MDM Tan simply had to help her daughter maintain a radiant smile and focus on making her the most beautiful bride in the world. The day they chose the wedding gown, when Li Ying appeared shyly from behind the curtain in a pure white dress, MDM Tan unknowingly burst into tears. It felt like only yesterday Li Ying was born a fluffy baby, yet now she was a graceful young lady ready to leave her nest. More than sadness, there was a greater sense of pride and gratitude. "Mommy, why are you crying? It's a happy day." Li Ying approached to wipe her tears, and MDM Tan forced a smile. "It's because my daughter is so beautiful. What bride in the world could be prettier than my Li Ying?" That night, MDM Tan couldn't sleep and rummaged through photo albums. In the faded black and white photos were a fresh-faced MDM Tan and her friends in school uniforms from years ago. 3 friends in particular stood out. Joyce, with her striking features, drew the attention of all the boys. Brenda, with her chubby cheeks, was adorable but utterly serious when it came to food. And Adeline, who always quietly followed Joyce. In those days, MDM Tan wasn't a noticeable child. Due to her ordinary appearance and shy personality, she always stood a step back from their flamboyant group. Yet a corner of her heart always held envy and admiration for them. After graduation, they lost touch as they lived their own lives, but MDM Tan occasionally heard news of them. They were all said to have married well, living ostentatiously and prosperously. Photos of them carrying designer handbags and traveling overseas frequently appeared on social media. In comparison, MDM Tan's life felt humble. Her husband's salary was barely enough, so she diligently saved money by working at a small eatery. She wanted to raise Li Ying to want for nothing. When Li Ying got into a good university, secured a job at a prestigious multinational corporation, and finally married the son of a respectable family, MDM Tan felt her life had finally been validated. And now she could proudly invite them. Her daughter's wedding was like a stage for MDM Tan to prove her life's worth. She wanted to show them. "Though I was an unremarkable presence in school, I have raised such a wonderful daughter. I am living just as happily as you, if not more so." MDM Tan excitedly picked up the phone. She called Joyce first. The phone rang a few times, then she heard that still clear and confident voice. "Oh, isn't this MDM Tan? It's been ages. How have you been?" "Yes, Joyce, it's me." "Your voice hasn't changed." "I'm doing well, and you?" "Oh, absolutely, I'm doing great." "But what's this sudden call about MDM? Tan took a deep breath and stated her purpose. "Well, my daughter Li Ying is getting married soon. I really wanted to share the news with you." "Oh, really? She's grown up so fast. Congratulations, MDM Tan. Your hard work has paid off." Joyce's voice contained more obligatory admiration than heartfelt congratulations. But MDM Tan deliberately ignored the subtle nuance. "So, if you're not too busy, I'd love for you and the girls to come for dinner after the ceremony. I miss seeing your faces." "Yes, of course I must come. It's our MDM Tan's daughter's wedding. I'll contact Brenda and Adeline too. Don't worry." MDM Tan then called Brenda and Adeline. Both greeted her warmly and promised to attend. Even after hanging up, MDM Tan's heart pounded for a while. Her face flushed at the thought of finally being able to show them her most brilliant moment. Her husband, who had been quietly reading the newspaper beside her, casually remarked, "Are you still in touch with those friends? Didn't you say you had a hard time because of them in school? Just because they're old classmates, you want to invite them for our daughter's wedding. Aren't you worried something awkward might happen if you invite them unnecessarily?" MDM Tan waved away his worried words. "Oh, that was all from when we were young. Now we're all older and wiser. Besides, it's Li Ying's wedding. It's better to be amicable," MDM Tan reassured herself. She believed that all past grudges were forgotten, and now, as mature adults, they could truly bless each other. She imagined meeting her friends who would arrive dressed glamorously on the wedding day and happily reminisced, unaware of what a terrible misconception it was, and that this invitation would be the key to opening the gates of hell. After receiving Madame Tan's call, Joyce pouted as soon as she hung up. Madame Tan, what's with her sudden call, acting all high and mighty just because her daughter is getting married? Joyce was sitting in the living room of her old, cramped HDB flat. Her social media profile picture, taken a few days ago in front of a luxury boutique on Orchard Road, was a stark contrast to her reality of struggling with credit card debt and loan interest. Her husband's business had been in decline for years, and the days of being called a tie were a distant memory. All that remained for her was an obsession with past glory and a deep inferiority complex about her current reality. Joyce immediately took out her smartphone and messaged the group chat with Brenda and Adeline. "Girls, Madame Tan just called. Her daughter's getting married, wants us to come." As soon as she sent the message, Brenda replied. Brenda, who ran a prawn noodle hawker stall, was sitting in her empty stall business, not doing well recently. "MDM Tan, seriously, where is it? What food will they serve?" A buffet, right? Brenda's only interest was food. Her life always began and ended with eating. The prawn noodle stall she started with her husband had been popular for a few months, but then larger, more modern eateries sprang up nearby and customers dwindled. She was struggling to cover the stall's rent and ingredient costs. Soon after, Adeline's message appeared. "A wedding, Madame Tan's daughter is already grown up. That's something to celebrate." Among the three, Adeline was relatively better off, but she too was struggling to pay for her two children's tuition fees on her husband's salary alone. She wasn't inherently malicious, but was indecisive and unable to speak her mind whenever she was with Joyce, feeling intimidated. Joyce typed again. "It's a super expensive wedding hall somewhere near Marina Bay, I heard. Looks like she really splurged." She was boasting about the top-grade hotel buffet. Of course, MDM Tan had never said such a thing. But Joyce was accustomed to belittling and exaggerating other situations to mask her own miserable reality. At her words, Brenda's eyes lit up. "Hotel buffet. Seriously. Then we have to go. Absolutely have to go." Adeline cautiously asked, "But how much should we put in the Ang Bao? I heard it's at least $100 for a Marina Bay wedding these days. That's a bit much." At Adeline's words, Joyce scoffed. "Ang Bao. Are we going there to give Ang Bao? We're going to see her face. And honestly, did MDM Tan ever treat us to a proper meal in school? Considering we always brought her along to hang out, we should consider that the payment for the meal, shouldn't we?" Brenda enthusiastically agreed with Joyce's brazen logic. "Exactly. Joyce is right. She should be grateful we're even going. How dare she expect an Ang Bao? And a hotel buffet would cost over $100 per person. So if we eat our fill, that's our Ang Bao, isn't it?" Adeline couldn't refute their unreasonable conversation. She couldn't ignore the sense of relief that she wouldn't have to pay a burdensome Ang Bao. "But isn't it a bit strange to go empty-handed?" "Don't worry, I have a plan. Instead, let's dress up as much as we can. We can't let our spirits be dampened, can we? We can't let that common MDM Tan look down on us. Wear everything you've got and bring your best handbags." At Joyce's words, the phrase "best handbag" pierced the hearts of the three women like a dagger. For them, a truly good handbag didn't exist. The Hermes Birkin bag Joyce claimed to have was a meticulously crafted fake bought for a few $100s from Bougus Street, and Brenda's Chanel classic bag was also a top-grade imitation bought online. The most expensive item Adeline owned was a mid-range brand bag her husband had bought her a few years ago as a special treat. "I don't have a bag suitable to carry," Adeline hesitated, and Joyce grandly declared. "Then I'll lend you one. I just got a new Louis Vuitton. It'll suit you perfectly." Of course, that Louis Vuitton was also fake, but Adeline had no way of knowing. Adeline profusely thanked Joyce for her offer, and so the three women's ugly plan was hatched. MDM Tan's goodwill and excitement were merely fuel to ignite their envy and greed. They decided to attend the wedding, not to congratulate Madame Tan's daughter, but solely to enjoy an expensive meal for free and feed their false vanity. A few days before the wedding, they gathered at Joyce's flat. Joyce, as if showing off her designer collection, displayed a pile of fake handbags in a corner of the room. "Here, choose one. This is the new collection. The leather quality is amazing, isn't it? Even an expert can't tell the difference." Brenda and Adeline exclaimed in admiration, picking up the bags. For them, whether the bags were real or fake didn't matter. All that mattered was how others would perceive them when they carried these bags. "What should I wear? I've gained weight, so I have nothing to fit," Brenda complained, patting her plump stomach. Don't worry, there are many pretty clothes in larger sizes these days. Choose the most extravagant one. We should stand out more than the bride, shouldn't we? At Joyce's words, the three women let out an unpleasant laugh in unison. The sound of their laughter, like the whisper of demons envying and mocking MDM Tan's happiness, spread ominously into the stale air of the old HDB flat. They eagerly awaited the moment on the upcoming wedding day that would inflict an indelible wound on MDM Tan. The morning of the wedding dawned. MDM Tan woke before dawn, dressed beautifully in an elegant, modern dress, and had her hair styled at the salon. Her reflection in the mirror felt unfamiliar yet satisfying. Today, she wanted to be the most graceful and happy mother of the bride in the world. As she entered the bridal suite where Li Ying was waiting, Madame Tan gasped. Her daughter, radiant in a dazzling wedding gown, looked like an angel. "Oh, my daughter is so beautiful. Mummy, you look very graceful today, too." Mother and daughter embraced, savoring the moment of happiness. Guests began to arrive one by one, and MDM Tan stood with her husband at the entrance, welcoming them. Words of blessing poured forth, and the Angbao reception table quickly filled with thick envelopes. A smile never left MDM Tan's face. Just then, an unusually boisterous group appeared at the wedding hall entrance. It was clearly Joyce and her companions. Joyce boldly carried an orange Birkin bag slung over her shoulder, wearing a bright red dress. Brenda wore a tight-fitting purple lace dress, which looked rather comical. In her hand was a Chanel bag with a gleaming gold logo. Adeline followed behind them, awkwardly holding the Louis Vuitton bag Joyce had lent her. "Oh, Madame Tan, congratulations, you look like a real tie-tie in that dress," Joyce exclaimed in an exaggerated voice as she approached. A cheap perfume scent and artificial glamour emanated from her. "Thank you for coming, Joyce. Brenda and Adeline, you all look so beautiful." Nimtan genuinely welcomed them. However, the sight of her friends struck her as somehow discordant. Their outfits and bags were clearly expensive designer items, but the demeanor and atmosphere of the women wearing them seemed somehow coarse and vulgar. Their gaze in particular was directed not at MDM Tan's face, but at the wedding hall's grand chandeliers and the banquet hall where the aroma of food wafted. "Come on in. Go see Li Ying." MDM Tan tried to guide them toward the reception table, but Joyce skillfully took her arm. "Oh no, it's fine. We'll take care of our Angbao later. It's too crowded now. We'll just go in and find seats first." Saying so, Joyce cleverly bypassed the reception table and slipped inside. Brenda and Adeline followed, smiling awkwardly. MDM Tan felt a moment of unease, but dismissed it, thinking her long unseen friends were just shy. In the rush, she didn't even have a chance to confirm whether they had given Angbaos. Entering the bridal suite, Joyce and her group made a huge fuss as soon as they saw Li Ying. "Oh, the bride is so pretty. Good thing she doesn't take after her mother." Li Ying's expression stiffened for a moment at Joyce's ambiguous compliment cum mockery, but she soon returned a smile. Brenda's attention was less on Li Ying's face and more on her dress tiara and bouquet. This dress must be expensive. "Is that tiara real diamonds?" Adeline nudged Brenda's arm beside her for her tactless questions, but Brenda paid no heed. Even while taking photos with Li Ying, they showed no consideration for making the bride stand out. Instead, they fussed adjusting angles to ensure their fake handbags were well captured. A short while later, an announcement indicated that the ceremony was about to begin. All the guests went into the main ballroom to take their seats. However, Joyce, Brenda, and Adeline lingered in the lobby. "Hey, why go in already? I'm starving." "When does the dining hall open?" Brenda whined. "It only opens after the ceremony, you silly." "But look over there, they seem to be setting up the food already. Should we go take a peek?" At Joyce's words, Brenda's face brightened. "Really, let's go, let's go. Hey, we should still watch the ceremony though. MDM Tan will be there." Adeline tried to dissuade them, but the two paid no attention. "We can see the ceremony photos later. Let's go our own way. We can't starve after coming all the way to this expensive place." Eventually, Adeline reluctantly followed them. The three women tiptoed like cats towards the dining hall. They were stopped by a staff member at the entrance, which was still restricted for guests, but Joyce brazenly lied. "Oh, we're relatives of the host family. The bride's mother isn't feeling well, so we're just getting her some drinks. It'll only take a moment." While the staff member hesitated, they swiftly slipped into the dining hall. What unfolded before their eyes was truly a feast of delicacies. Glossy braised short ribs, a sushi counter brimming with fresh seafood, tempting chili crab, and smoked salmon and beautifully arranged dessert. Wow, this is amazing. Brenda couldn't close her mouth. The three women quickly scanned their surroundings. Confirming that no one was there as the ceremony was still underway, they immediately grabbed plates and rushed towards the food. In that moment, there was no trace of their friendship with Medium Tan, no congratulations for Li Ying's marriage, nor any semblance of basic human decency in their minds. Only raw greed for the food before them burned fiercely. Li Ying walked down the pristine aisle hand in hand with her father, watching her daughter take each step to the elegant wedding march. Madame Tan's eyes welled up. Seeing the groom strong and protective take Li Ying's hand at the altar, a mix of emotions washed over Mendiam. Tan, joy, pride, and an inexplicable pang of wistfulness. As the vows were exchanged and the bride and groom pledged their love to each other, the ceremony hall was filled with a solemn and sacred atmosphere. All the guests held their breath, blessing the couple's future. However, a completely different scene was unfolding in a corner of the dining hall. Joyce, Brenda, and Adeline were already seated at a table greedily devouring food. Their intention was to sample as much as possible before the ceremony ended and the other guests arrived. Wow, this braised short rib is really good. The meat just melts in your mouth. Brenda had sauce all over her mouth as she buried her face in her plate. Her plate was already piled high, with braised short ribs, chapchai, and beef tartare. Get some steak, too. The one grilled fresh at that live station over there. I'll go get some wine. Joyce, as if in her own living room, casually went to the wine counter and returned with bottles of red and white wine. Are we allowed to drink alcohol while the ceremony is still on? Adeline asked nervously, but Joyce scoffed. What does it matter? It's going to be drunk anyway, whether now or later. Come on, everyone, let's have a drink. Our MDM Tan must have broken her back to put her daughter through such an expensive wedding. We should eat heartily to make it worth her while. At Joyce's sarcastic remark, the three women giggled among themselves and clinked their wine glasses. The congratulatory song resounding from the ceremony hall, where sacred vows were being exchanged, was merely annoying background noise to their ears. When the ceremony ended and the bride and groom's procession began, the doors to the dining hall finally swung open. Numerous guests poured in looking perplexed at the three women who were already enjoying their drinks in a corner. But with so many people and so much commotion, no one had time to pay them much mind. MDM Tan was going around to each table with the bride and groom, expressing her gratitude to the guests. She was busy pouring drinks and exchanging pleasantries with long unseen relatives, her husband's colleagues, and Li Ying's friends. Then she happened to glance at the table where her classmates were seated. Her friends' faces were flushed, and they were laughing and chatting loudly. The table was littered with empty plates and bottles of alcohol. Their appearance seemed somehow out of place, not blending in with the other guests. I should go check on them, MDM Tan thought, and tried to move towards their table, but other guests kept approaching to greet her, so she couldn't find an opportunity. Meanwhile, Joyce's group's misconduct became increasingly blatant. Hey, look at that chili crab leg. Let's get all of it. Brenda, despite having emptied several plates, still prowled the buffet section like a starving person. She didn't hesitate to cut cues in front of popular dishes where people were waiting. Other guests frowned, but Brenda paid no attention. Joyce was even bolder. As soon as the buffet staff brought out a new bottle of wine, she promptly took it to their table. She even loudly reprimanded a staff member asking if they didn't have a specific brand of wine. What, you call this a hotel buffet and this is all the wine you have? Your customer service is terrible. The staff member's face hardened at her brazen attitude, but unable to cause a scene on such an auspicious day, he could only repeatedly apologize. Adeline, though uneasy about the two's audacious behavior, couldn't refuse the food they brought her. The temptation of being able to eat expensive hotel buffet food to her heart's content was enough to numb her conscience. She had also already consumed a few glasses of wine, blurring her judgment. They did not spare a single glance for the bride and groom, the protagonists of the wedding. They focused solely on the food and alcohol. For them, this occasion was not a joyous celebration for MDM Tan's daughter, but merely a free meal where they had to get their money's worth. Amidst the sharp glances of the surrounding guests, their ugly feast continued unabated. It wouldn't be long before MDM Tan discovered the horrific truth. As the buffet meal reached its peak, the misdeeds of Joyce's group entered a new phase. Having eaten their fill to the point of bursting, they now began to devise a plan to pack up the remaining food. "Oh, I'm too full to eat anymore. But it's such a waste to leave all that sashimi and sushi." Brenda clicked her tongue in regret. Joyce then gave a meaningful smile and patted her large Birkin bag. "Who said we're leaving it? You need to use your head." Joyce quickly glanced around, then pulled out a few black plastic bags from inside her handbag. Brenda and Adeline's eyes widened at the sight. "Oh my Joyce, you came prepared with these. Of course I knew this would happen, so I brought them in advance. Here, your bags are big too. Fill them up as much as you can. This will take care of dinner for a few nights." Joyce's words were like a signal. Even Adeline, who had hesitated for a moment, soon succumbed to greed and nodded. The three women began to move stealthily like spies carrying out a mission. Brenda headed to her specialty, the meat section. Taking advantage of moments when no one was around, she pretended to put several slices of grilled steak and LA Galbi onto her plate, then quickly transferred them into a plastic bag. Her movements were remarkably skillful and swift. Her expertise in handling meat from running a prawn noodle stall was proving useful here. Joyce aimed for more expensive items. She selected smoked salmon, fried prawns, and expensive cheeses and fruits. She even showed meticulousness by taking the small honey pots and butter pats placed on the table. Fearing her fake Birkin bag might get dirty with food, she wrapped the plastic bags multiple times before carefully pushing them deep inside her handbag. Adeline timidly circled the dessert section, hesitating as she looked at the beautifully packaged macarons, cake slices, and cookies. She eventually, under the watchful eyes of Joyce and Brenda, picked a few and placed them in a plastic bag. Although she felt guilty self-justification, everyone else must be doing this too, made her actions increasingly bold. Their peculiar behavior was noticed by a university student working part-time at the banquet hall. The student who went to clear empty plates near their table witnessed Brenda stuffing a greasy plastic bag into her large Chanel bag and couldn't believe her eyes. Could they possibly be packing food? The student watched them intently for a moment, unable to believe it. Sure enough, all three women were repeatedly moving between the buffet counter and their table, continuously putting something into their bags. Joyce was even struggling to put an entire bottle of wine from the table into her bag. When the bottle was too big to fit, she frowned and showed annoyance. The part-timer immediately ran to the banquet hall manager to report this. "Manager, the three ladies at that table are continuously packing food into their bags. I think they're even taking wine bottles." The manager's brow furrowed. While it was not uncommon for guests at events like weddings or first birthday celebrations to take small amounts of food, this was the first time he had seen such blatant and organized hoarding. Furthermore, their attire suggested they were affluent tai-tais by all appearances. The manager quietly approached their table. Unaware that the manager was approaching, the three women were giggling among themselves, checking their loot. "I got steak and ribs. This will last me a few days. I got wine and salmon. Today was a total windfall. Should we thank Madame Tan?" Hearing their conversation, the manager understood the entire situation. However, he couldn't cause a commotion right then and there. Today was the most important day for the bridegroom and their families. He decided to quietly withdraw and monitor the situation. He then began to consider when and how to inform the host family. The three women, completely oblivious that their criminal act had been discovered, hid their bulging bags under their chairs and nonchalantly returned to their seats, chatting away. Their large fake handbags were now filled with top-grade hotel food waste, emitting an unpleasant odor. Along with the weight of those bags, their conscience and dignity were also plummeting into the gutter. Eventually, all the official events of the wedding concluded, and the bride and groom went for the tea ceremony. Only then did Madame Tan breathe a sigh of relief and head towards the table where her friends were seated. She felt bad for not having been able to properly attend to them earlier. "Girls, I finally made it. Did you like the food? Please eat plenty." MDM Tan approached with a bright smile, but her friends' reactions were lukewarm. Having already stuffed themselves and generously consumed free alcohol, their faces clearly showed an attitude of lazy annoyance. "Oh, you're here. The food was all right, I guess." "Not as good as I expected," Joyce said, pouting. It was an attitude of finding fault rather than gratitude after having gorged themselves for free. MDM Tan felt a pang of disappointment but managed to maintain her expression. Still, thank you so much for coming all this way. It's so nice to see you all, it brings back old memories. As MDM Tan spoke with a wistful expression, Brenda belched and retorted, old memories. What old memories? We're all old and wrinkled now. Anyway, your in-laws must be super rich. Having a wedding in a place like this, you've really changed your fortune. Brenda's words were laced with blatant envy and jealousy rather than congratulations. MDM Tan didn't know how to respond and just gave an awkward laugh. Just then, MDM Tan casually looked at the table and noticed something strange. Other tables had small wedding favors and meal vouchers as a thank you for the ang baos, but this table uniquely lacked them. This meant they hadn't picked up meal vouchers from the reception. What happened? Did they just walk in during the rush earlier? The thought of them bypassing the reception table earlier flashed through her mind. A terrifying suspicion crossed her, but she immediately shook her head. No matter what, they're my friends. They wouldn't have come to my daughter's wedding without giving an ang bao she wanted to believe. Perhaps they intend to give it to me directly when they leave. MDM Tan decided to think the best of them, but the ominous feeling lingered. The conversation with her friends continued to be disjointed. They showed no interest in MDM Tan's well-being or Li Ying's newlywed life. They only boasted about their own children, talked about money, or gossiped about other classmates. You know, I heard Mrs. Tan bought her son a condominium in the CBD area when he got married. Having a successful husband really makes a difference, doesn't it? That's all a lie. I heard half of it is on loan. It's all glitz and no substance. MDM Tan couldn't join their conversation. She felt like an invisible person. Just then, guests from an adjacent table got up and approached MDM Tan to greet her. Madam, congratulations on your daughter's wedding. The bride is a beauty just like her mother. They were regular customers whom MDM Tan knew from her days working at the eatery. MDM Tan warmly saw them off. As they disappeared, Joyce asked with a sneer, "Who were they? Are you still working at that eatery?" The tone carried contempt, implying, "You're still doing such menial work." MDM Tan's face hardened instantly. "No, I'm not anymore. They're just people I used to know." Just as I thought. They looked exactly the part. Hey, MDM Tan, why don't you leverage your rich in-laws and get a proper position somewhere? How long are you going to live like that? Joyce's rude words pierced MDM Tan's heart like a dagger. It felt as if her entire life, where she had never shied away from hard work for her daughter's sake, was being utterly dismissed. The faces of her hardworking husband and her proud daughter flashed before her, and she felt tears welling up. MDM Tan could no longer sit there. "I'll just go to the restroom for a moment." She hastily excused herself. Her friends chuckled amongst themselves as they watched her leave. Is she crying? She's got too much pride. I know, right? We just told her the truth. Why is she like this? Only Adeline looked at the direction MDM Tan had disappeared with a worried expression. Standing before the restroom mirror, MDM Tan confronted her own wretched face. Her carefully applied makeup was smeared with anger and sorrow. The wounds inflicted by those she believed were her friends were much deeper and more painful than she had imagined. The suspicion that they hadn't given an ang bao, their condescending tone, their disrespectful attitude towards the wedding, everything fit together like puzzle pieces forming a horrific picture. MDM Tan washed her face with cold water. Nothing was confirmed yet. It might have been a hasty judgment, but the solid trust she had in their friendship had already begun to crack in her heart. That small fissure was a prelude to an uncontrollable catastrophe. Emerging from the restroom, MDM Tan walked across the banquet hall with a heavy heart. Then she saw her husband, his face stiff, in a serious conversation with the banquet hall manager. Wondering what was wrong, she approached, and her husband, spotting her, quickly ended their conversation and came to her. "Are you all right? Why the long face?" "No, I'm fine. Just got some fresh air." "But what were you talking to the manager about?" At MDM Tan's question, her husband hesitated for a moment, then took her hand and led her to a quiet corridor outside the banquet hall. Sensing the unusual grimness in her husband's expression, Man Tan's heart sank. "Darling, what's wrong? Has something happened?" Her husband sighed deeply and began. "Those old classmates of yours, the ones you invited earlier." "Yes, Joyce and them." "Why?" "The manager said they started eating food in the dining hall even before the ceremony began." "What? What do you mean? That's not all. They secretly packed a lot of buffet food into their bags." A part-timer saw it and reported it to the manager, who confirmed it himself. Her husband's words struck MDM Tan like a thunderbolt. Her mind went blank. The suspicions she had tried to dismiss became a terrible reality unfolding before her eyes. It's a lie, right? It can't be. No matter what, how could they come to my daughter's wedding and… Madame Tan couldn't finish her sentence, her lips trembling. Her husband looked at his distraught wife with pity and continued, and their names weren't on the reception list either. They didn't give any bows. This was the final blow. MDM Tan's legs gave way and she almost collapsed, but her husband supported her. Hot tears streamed down MDM Tan's face incessantly. More than sorrow, it was betrayal and humiliation. She couldn't believe that her sincere heart and her only daughter's precious wedding could be so trampled upon and desecrated. She realized with bitter clarity how foolish and futile her long-held pity and nostalgia had been. I was a fool. You were right, but I foolishly invited them and ruined everything. I ruined Li Ying's wedding. MDM Tan sobbed, blaming herself. Her husband quietly stroked her back, comforting her. It's not your fault. Those people who abandoned human decency are the bad ones. Just calm down. If we cause a scene here, only Li Ying will be hurt. Just then, the banquet hall manager cautiously approached from down the corridor. He bowed respectfully to MDM Tan and her husband. I am truly sorry, madam. To have to tell you about such an unpleasant matter on a happy day, we bear significant responsibility for not preventing it earlier. No, it's not your fault, manager. How could it be? Her husband replied on her behalf. The manager hesitated for a moment before speaking. Would you perhaps like to review the CCTV footage from our security room? Their actions were fully captured, just in case there are any issues later. MDM Tan looked at her husband's face. He nodded with a firm expression. MDM Tan had to see it with her own eyes, even if just to completely sever this persistent, lingering attachment. On the small monitor screen in the security room, an unbelievable scene unfolded vividly. Them secretly entering the dining hall before the ceremony even began, piling food onto plates mountain high. Them greedily devouring food, giggling among themselves. And finally, them pulling out black plastic bags to steal steaks, salmon, and even bottles of wine, stuffing them into their bags. Everything was clearly recorded, especially when she saw Brenda with greasy hands stuffing braised ribs into her fake Chanel bag. Madame Tan let out a bitter laugh. Sorrow had by then turned into cold fury. Looking at their ugly, distorted faces on the screen, MDM Tan bid a final farewell to her past, a past where she had always cowered behind them throughout her school days. Enough. I understand everything now. MDM Tan wiped her tears and stood up. Her eyes were no longer wet with sorrow. Cold, resolute determination had taken its place. Darling, I'm not letting those people get away with this. I will never forgive them. Her voice was low and quiet, but it contained an iron will. Her husband silently put his arm around her shoulder. He intended to support his wife's decision, whatever it might be, to the very end. It was the moment a good woman's kind heart was shattered into pieces, and at the same time the moment a mother's terrifying wrath began to erupt like a volcano. MDM Tan, having viewed the CCTV footage, was completely transformed. Her tear-stained face now held an icy demeanor. She was no longer a victim hurt and saddened. She was a judge determined to make those who had trampled on her dignity and her daughter's happiness pay for their sins. Her husband silently observed this change in his wife. For the first time, he saw such a cold and resolute side to his wife, who had always lived her life gently and mildly. Darling, what are you planning to do? I'm going to report them to the police, Madame Tan replied, without a moment's hesitation. They entered and ate food without giving an bow, so that's fraud. And since they stole buffet, food theft will be added. Especially since several people committed this together, it could be aggravated theft. Her husband was secretly surprised to hear legal terms flow from MDM Tan, who usually had no dealings with the law. He could guess how deeply shocked and angered she was. Isn't that too extreme? Can't we just cut ties and never see them again? Her husband cautiously asked, wondering if his wife was making too drastic a choice. But Madame Tan firmly shook her head. No, simply not seeing them again isn't enough. They won't reflect on what they did at all. They'll just grumble about having bad luck and not getting a free meal. And behind my back, they'll mock me for the rest of their lives. I can't stand that. Madame Tan's voice trembled slightly. They defiled my daughter's most precious day. It's not about a few plates of food or a few bottles of wine. My daughter's wedding was just a place for them to commit theft and fraud. How can I even begin to describe that humiliation, that shame? They must pay the price for their actions. In the name of the law, MDM Tan's eyes seemed to burn with fire. She wasn't merely seeking emotional revenge. This was a battle to restore her shattered pride to protect her life and her daughter's life. All right, if that's what you want, I'll support you. Tell me if there's anything I can do to help. Her husband decided to respect his wife's decision. He immediately went to the banquet hall manager, formally reported the incident, and requested the CCTV footage as evidence. He also clearly stated his intention to claim damages for the cost of the food consumed by the three women and the items stolen as part of the wedding cost settlement. The manager, surprised by MDM Tan and her husband's firm stance, promised to cooperate fully. He began to inventory the buffet section and collect staff testimonies to calculate the exact amount of damages. At that moment, Joyce's group, completely oblivious to all this, was leaving the wedding hall in high spirits, their bags bulging. Wow, we really feasted today. Thanks to MDM Tan, we got a proper nutritious meal, Brenda said, patting her satisfied stomach. I know, right. My bag is full and I feel great. Hey, it's a shame to part ways like this. Should we go to a KTV lounge? My treat, Joyce exclaimed, exhilarated by the stolen wine. They chuckled, completely unaware of the catastrophe. Their actions would unleash already seeking their next entertainment. Behind their backs, MDM Tan's cold gaze followed them like an icy dagger. MDM Tan, after the tea ceremony, managed to put on the happiest mother's smile for Li Ying, pretending nothing was amiss. She didn't want to burden her daughter's honeymoon trip. She decided to bear this dirty and ugly affair entirely on her own. When all the wedding commotion had ended and she stood in the empty banquet hall, MDM Tan let out a deep sigh. The grand celebration was over, and it was time to face the cold reality. But she was not afraid. Instead, she felt a burning courage rising from deep within her heart. As soon as morning broke, she would go to the police station, and she would put an end to this terrible, ill-fated connection herself. The day after the wedding, MDM Tan woke before dawn. She hadn't slept a wink all night, but her mind was clearer than ever. She pulled something from deep inside her dressing table drawer. It was a USB stick containing the CCTV footage and a detailed list of damages handed to her by the wedding hall manager the previous day. The list chillingly itemized the food they had consumed and the stolen wine, steak, and salmon with their corresponding costs. The total damages exceeded $1,000. MDM Tan changed her clothes and quietly left the house. Her husband silently patted her shoulder. That alone gave her great strength. The door to the police station's public inquiry office was heavy and cold. It was early morning, so the interior was quiet. MDM Tan hesitated for a moment, then approached the reception counter and stated her purpose. Her voice did not tremble. I'm here to file a complaint for fraud and aggravated theft. Her firm demeanor briefly surprised the counter staff, who then directed her to the detective in charge. MDM Tan sat at a small desk partitioned off in the Economic Crimes Unit office. Across from her sat Detective Kim, a middle-aged man with clear signs of fatigue. How may I help you? Detective Kim asked with an indifferent expression. For him, dealing with dozens of large and small cases every day, a complainant's story was just another task. MDM Tan calmly began to explain what had happened yesterday. She told him that her old classmates whom she had invited to her daughter's wedding had entered without giving an ang bao, eaten the food, and even secretly stolen buffet items. Her explanation was logical and unemotional. Detective Kim, who had initially listened indifferently, grew increasingly serious. It was common to hear about food being stolen at wedding venues, but it was rare for such an act to be committed so brazenly and systematically. So did you personally witness them stealing the food? No, but I have evidence here. MDM Tan placed the prepared USB stick on the desk. This is the wedding hall's security CCTV footage. All their actions are recorded. And this is the damage report prepared by the wedding hall. Detective Kim took the USB and connected it to his computer. As the video played on the monitor, his brow furrowed. The screen clearly showed 3 women stuffing an abnormal amount of food onto their plates, drinking alcohol, and finally pulling out plastic bags to stash food into their handbags. After watching the entire video, Detective Kim sighed and said, "Madam, this is not a simple incident. It is clearly a criminal offense." Since 2 or more people conspired to commit theft, aggravated theft charges can be applied, and since they ate with no intention of paying for the food from the start, fraud charges are also fully applicable. Hearing Detective Kim's words, MDM Tan finally felt validated in her decision. Will you be filing a complaint? Once it's filed, it cannot be withdrawn. Do you have any intention of settling with the other parties? I have absolutely no intention of settling. Please let them be punished according to the law. At MDM Tan's firm reply, Detective Kim asked no further questions and handed her a complaint form. MDM Tan, with trembling hands, picked up the pen and carefully filled out the complaint form letter by letter. As she wrote down Joyce, Brenda, and Adeline's names in the defendant section, the last lingering attachment and pity she had for them completely vanished from her heart. Leaving the police station after filing the complaint, Mordenton's steps felt strangely light. The sky was just as blue and high as yesterday. But for Mordenton, that sky was no longer an object of resentment and sorrow. She was now an agent forging her own destiny and realizing justice. The dice were cast. It was now the turn of the law to judge them. She decided to return home and quietly await the end of all this turmoil. It was a weekday afternoon, a few days after Madame Tan filed the complaint. The doorbell rang at Joyce's HDB flat where she was killing time watching television. Who is it? I didn't order any delivery. Joyce irritably looked at the intercom screen. 2 unfamiliar men stood on the screen. We're from Tanglin Police Division. Is this Miss Joyce Pack? At the mention of the police, Joyce's heart sank. Her first thought was that they might be there about overdue credit card payments. She reluctantly opened the door. The plainclothes officers entered, glanced around the flat, then showed Joyce their police identification. Miss Joyce Pack, did you go to the Grand Marina Wedding Hall last Saturday? At the mention of the wedding hall, Joyce felt a sense of relief but also perplexity. Yes, I did. It was my friend's daughter's wedding. Is there a problem? A complaint has been filed against you for consuming food at the wedding hall buffet that day and taking some food away in your bag. The charges are aggravated, theft, and fraud. We need you to come to the station with us for questioning. At the words aggravated theft and fraud from the officer's mouth, Joyce's face went pale. What? What are you saying? I stole something. Don't talk nonsense. Do you think I went all the way there to steal a few paltry pieces of food? This is Ma'am Tan's doing, isn't it? How dare that woman? Joyce shrieked hysterically. But the officers didn't bat an eyelid. We can discuss everything at the station. If you refuse voluntary accompaniment now, we can obtain an arrest warrant and escort you by force. At the officer's firm words, Joyce's defiance faltered. She had no choice but to follow the officers, her face ashen. The whispers of the neighbors felt like daggers in her back. At the same time, officers also stormed Brenda's prawn noodle stall. Although it was past lunchtime, Brenda was watching a drama on her smartphone in her empty stall. When the officers arrived and explained the charges, Brenda's reaction was quite different from Joyce's. She immediately collapsed onto the floor and started crying. I made a mistake. The food just looked so delicious. I'm so sorry. Please, just one chance. Brenda thought that simply begging for forgiveness would solve everything. But the officers were unyielding. You can think about settling with the victim later. For now, you need to come in for questioning. Please stand up. In the end, Brenda was led away by the officers to a police car sobbing without even being able to close her stall. Adeline's situation was even more dramatic. As she went down to the apartment car park to pick up her children from tuition, officers appeared before her. Upon being informed of the same charges, Adeline's face became deathly pale. She trembled uncontrollably. Joyce made me do it. I really didn't want to. Adeline tried to evade responsibility, but it was already futile. She ultimately had to go to the police station without picking up her children. Her mind was filled only with the desperate thought that her life was over. Separated into different interrogation rooms at the police station, the 3 women were realizing how naive and foolish they had been. Joyce stubbornly denied the charges to the very end. Do you have proof? Did anyone see me steal? Isn't that CCTV footage edited? I only ate what I paid for, fair and square. But in the face of the clear CCTV footage played by the detective, the wedding hall staff's testimony, and MDM Tan's resolute complaint, her lies lost their power. Brenda just cried throughout the interrogation. She appealed for sympathy, saying her husband scolded her for poor business and she was stressed, but her tears no longer worked. The first to break was Adeline. Naturally timid and easily frightened, she began to confess everything after just a few questions from the detective. "We decided not to give an bow from the beginning," Joyce suggested it. Joyce also brought out the plastic bags first to pack food. I didn't want to be excluded by my friends, so I had no choice." Adeline's confession became crucial evidence. To lighten her own sway, she described in detail the other two's crimes. The strong friendship they once boasted, united in mocking MDM Tan, shattered so easily in the cold reality of the police interrogation room. The judgment of the law knocking on each of their doors was now beginning to shake their entire lives. As the police investigation commenced, the fortress of lies built by the three women crumbled mercilessly. Adeline's confession in particular played a decisive role in understanding the full extent of the incident. The police used Adeline's testimony to put more pressure on Joyce and Brenda. Eventually, search warrants were issued for Joyce's and Brenda's homes and Brenda's prawn noodle stall. When the officers arrived, their families were shocked and horrified. Joyce's husband hadn't even known his wife was being questioned by the police. He stood there dazed and helpless while the officers searched their flat. And when the wedding hall's steak and salmon wrapped in plastic bags and frozen solid were found deep in the freezer, he couldn't hide his face, overwhelmed with shame. What is all this? These are the stolen goods from Miss Joyce Pack. Didn't you know? At the officer's cold words, her husband couldn't answer. He had suspected something was wrong when his wife regularly posted luxury items on social media to show off, but he never imagined she would commit such an outrageous act. Through this incident, her husband also discovered the immense credit card debt Joyce had hidden. Their marriage was heading for an irreversible catastrophe. Brenda's prawn noodle stall was pure chaos. When officers stormed in and searched, the stall's refrigerators, braised short ribs, and various seafood stolen from the wedding hall spilled out. Brenda's husband, humiliated in front of neighboring stall owners, couldn't contain his rage and shouted, "You crazy woman, are you trying to ruin our business? What's so important about food that you resort to stealing?" Although he had often scolded his wife for her gluttony, he never thought she would commit a crime, and he felt deeply betrayed. News of the incident spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, and the stall, now branded as the Thief's Eatery, lost all its customers. Fortunately, no stolen food was found at Adeline's home. She had been so frightened that she had discarded all the desserts she had taken home that day as soon as she arrived. However, the mere fact that the police had visited shattered her family. Her husband, who had always lived a normal and diligent life, could not accept that his wife was involved in aggravated theft. "Are you out of your mind? How can you face our children? How could you do such a thing, darling? I'm sorry. I truly made a mistake." Adeline wept, begging for forgiveness, but the broken trust could not be restored. Only a cold chill permeated their marriage. The ugly truth of the three women didn't end there. During the search, police also discovered numerous fake designer handbags and accessories they possessed. While not direct evidence in this case, these items symbolized how much their lives were filled with vanity and deceit. In the end, Joyce and Brenda had no choice but to admit to all charges. They expressed belated regret in the face of the terrible consequences brought about by their foolish actions, but it was already too late. There was no room for negotiation due to MDM Tan's resolute will. What awaited them after their police interrogation and release were the cold stares of their families and the contemptuous whispers of those around them. Once the three women had flaunted their friendship, each upholding the other's superficial glamour. But once their false masks were stripped away, all that remained for them was a shabby and miserable reality. Their lives were now spiraling towards an uncontrollable downfall. The police investigation concluded, and the case was forwarded to the Attorney General's chambers. Joyce, Brenda, and Adeline were charged without detention for aggravated theft and fraud. The price for one free meal and a few stolen food items was far more severe than they could have imagined. While the legal process was underway, the wedding hall also filed a civil lawsuit against them. The claims sought not only compensation for the food they consumed and stole, but also damages for loss of business due to the harm caused to the wedding hall's image by this incident. The requested compensation amounted to tens of thousands of dollars. The three women desperately tried to salvage the situation. They called MDM Tan dozens of times and even visited her home. But MDM Tan would neither meet them nor answer their calls. Her heart had long since turned away. "MDM Tan, please, "We truly committed a grave sin. Please forgive us just once. If only you withdraw the complaint," Joyce pleaded at MDM Tan's doorstep, but the door remained firmly shut. The woman who once dismissed and mocked MDM Tan was now reduced to abjectly begging for forgiveness. Their appearance in court was utterly pathetic. Their flashy clothes and fake handbags were gone, replaced by downcast heads awaiting judgment like criminals. During the trial, their ugly motives and the details of their crime were thoroughly exposed, especially the fact that they had no intention of paying an angbao from the beginning, and that they had even prepared plastic bags in advance to steal food, created a very negative impression of their culpability. Adeline, whose cooperative and remorseful attitude during the investigation was taken into consideration, received a suspended sentence. However, Joyce, who orchestrated the crime and maintained a brazen attitude to the end, and Brenda, who showed a propensity for habitual theft of food, could not escape prison time. Both were sentenced to several months' imprisonment. Although they avoided immediate custodial sentences, they were branded with the indelible mark of a criminal record. The outcome of the civil trial was equally harsh. The court ordered them jointly and severally to pay tens of thousands of dollars in damages to the wedding hall. Unable to raise such a sum immediately, they plunged into despair. The incident was even briefly reported in the social section of a local newspaper. "Thoughtless old friends clear out wedding buffet, end up in cuffs," read the sensational headline, and the article quickly spread through online communities. Although their identities were not explicitly revealed, anyone in their neighborhood knew whose story it was. Ultimately, the price they had to pay was not merely legal punishment and financial compensation. They lost social trust, human relationships, and even their family's happiness. Their foolish greed, coveting a single free meal, returned like a boomerang, utterly destroying their entire lives. Only then did they realize with bitter clarity that what they had stolen was not merely a few pieces of steak and a bottle of wine, but a friend's trust and human dignity. But time could not be turned back. After the legal judgment, the lives of the three women began their precipitous decline. The reality they faced was far colder and more miserable than the court's pronouncements. The first to crumble was Joyce. Her husband, unable to bear his wife's shameless crime and mountainous debt, presented her with divorce papers. Joyce pleaded, but her husband's heart had already turned away. In the end, she had to leave their home virtually kicked out, without a cent in alimony. Her final destination, after playing the part of a glamorous tai-tai, was a dilapidated rented room with no deposit. Credit card companies hounded her with demands for payment, and all the acquaintances who once followed her turned their backs. Her seemingly glamorous life on social media vanished like a mirage, leaving behind only a miserable reality. She had to start working menial jobs in a restaurant kitchen to make ends meet. It was the very work MDM Tan used to do. Brenda's prawn noodle stall eventually closed. The rumor of it being a thief's eatery had completely driven away customers. Burdened with debts from closing the stall, the relationship between Brenda and her husband deteriorated to its worst. Fighting about money every day, they eventually went their separate ways. Her husband left without a trace, and Brenda was left with no savings or capital to start anew in a desperate plight. She was reduced to moving from relative's house to relative's house, living off their charity. Once she had been so obsessed with other people's food, but now even eating a warm meal comfortably was a luxury. Adeline, who received a suspended sentence, was in a similar situation. Although she avoided prison, the label of criminal wife continued to constrict her life. Her husband treated her like an invisible person, and even her children were ashamed of their mother and avoided her. Ugly rumors about her circulated in their apartment complex, and neighbors shunned her as if she were vermin. She was even expelled from the parents' group she once joined for her children's education. Adeline was trapped in the prison of her home, shedding tears of regret and self-reproach every day. She realized that everything was due to her indecisiveness and foolish choices, but there was no way to recover what she had lost. The three women slowly crumbled in their respective hells. They occasionally heard news of each other, but now instead of comforting each other, they were busy blaming and accusing. "It's all because of that, Joyce. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have done this." Brenda was just crazy about food. If she had just kept her head, things wouldn't have escalated so much. Why did Adeline blurt everything out to the police? If only she had kept quiet. Their relationship, which once fueled each other's vanity and united them, had now devolved into an ugly mudslinging fight, each shifting blame to the others. Their downfall was just the prelude. They would now experience firsthand how much more miserable the end of a life built on lies and greed could become. Li Ying only learned the full extent of the incident after returning from her honeymoon. At first, she couldn't believe that her mother's friends had committed such a terrible act. But after listening to MDM, Tan calmly recount the details of the incident and the process that led to the police station, Li Ying was deeply shocked. "Mummy, how hard it must have been for you alone. Why didn't you tell me straight away?" Li Ying embraced her mother and wept. Her heart ached at the thought that on her happiest day, her mother had suffered such terrible betrayal and humiliation behind her back. "It's all right. It's all in the past. I didn't want to ruin your honeymoon." MDM Tan comforted her daughter instead. On her face, there was no regret or lingering attachment, but the steadfastness of someone who had overcome everything. Still, was it really necessary to report them to the police? Couldn't you have just let it go quietly? Li Ying asked cautiously. She understood her mother's pain, but wondered if legal action was an excessive response. MDM Tan looked her daughter straight in the eyes and said, "Li Ying, do you know why Mummy did that? It wasn't just about a few plates of food. Those people desecrated my wedding, the most precious beginning of my life, and they dismissed and trampled on me, the person I am my entire life. If Mummy had just let it go, then I would have been tormented by that memory, forever blaming and hating myself, thinking, why do I always get walked all over?" MDM Tan held her daughter's hand tightly. "Mummy didn't want you to remember me as that kind of mother. A person who doesn't stay silent in the face of injustice, who has the courage to protect her dignity. Someone who, even without much education or wealth, is more upright and strong than anyone else. That's the kind of mother I wanted to be. That's why I fought. It was a fight against them, but perhaps it was also a fight against my past self, who had lived timidly all her life." As Li Ying listened to MDM Tan's words, her eyes filled not with tears but with respect. She finally understood her mother's profound meaning. Her mother's choice was not revenge, but the best defense to protect herself and her family, and the greatest expression of love. "Mummy, you are truly amazing. I am so proud to be your daughter," Li Ying said with sincerity. From that day on, the bond between mother and daughter grew much deeper and stronger. Li Ying came to realize her mother's strength anew, and MDM Tan was able to fully heal the wounds in her heart through her daughter's warm comfort. A few days later, MDM Tan and her husband were invited to their daughter's new home. Sharing a lovingly prepared dinner by Li Ying and her son-in-law, MDM Tan, could finally relax and smile freely after a long time. The commotion of the wedding felt like a distant past. After dinner, as they sat in the living room eating fruit, a short news report about the trial results of Joyce and her group played on TV. MDM Tan watched the screen for a moment, but then, unfazed, she took another slice of apple her son-in-law was peeling for her. There was no longer any anger or resentment towards them in her heart. They were simply criminals who had faced the judgment of the law, having no further relevance to her life. MDM Tan realized that true victory was not in destroying the opponent, but in reaching a state where one's own happiness was no longer swayed by them. She no longer feared anyone's gaze or judgment. She believed that with the love of her family and faith in herself, she could overcome any hardship that came her way. She was being reborn as a stronger mother and a complete individual. Time passed and seasons changed several times. Peace found its way into MDM Tan's life. The tumultuous wedding and the subsequent storm of lawsuits faded into the distant past. MDM Tan began a hobby of tending a small vegetable patch. She would wake early, prepare the soil with a hoe, carefully plant seeds, and lovingly water them every day. Watching the tiny sprouts emerge, the green leaves grow, and finally plump fruits ripen, she felt the joy and fullness of being alive. Harvesting the lettuce and tomatoes she had nurtured with her own sweat and sending them to her daughter's home was her greatest joy these days. Her husband remained taciturn, but his gaze towards his wife had softened significantly. He felt that his wife had become even stronger and wiser after enduring that terrible incident. On weekends, he would join her in the garden to pull weeds, and they would quietly stand by each other's side. Li Ying recently announced her pregnancy. MDM Tan was overjoyed at the thought of becoming a grandmother. Preparing cute baby clothes and shoes for her daughter, she spent her days filled with anticipation for the new life. One afternoon, MDM Tan was returning home after working in her vegetable patch when she encountered a shabbily dressed woman at the entrance of the neighborhood market. With rumpled clothes, vacant eyes, and sunken cheeks, it was Joyce upon closer inspection. The image of her once draped in flashy designer goods, albeit fakes, was gone, replaced only by the worn-out appearance of someone weary of life. Joyce also recognized MDM Tan, startled. She quickly bowed her head and hurried away. MDM Tan quietly watched her retreating figure for a moment. Her heart was surprisingly calm. No pity, no triumph, no emotion stirred within her. She felt merely indifferent, as if she had seen a stranger from another world. She no longer wondered what had become of their lives. They were simply reaping the fruits of the seeds they had sown. MDM Tan no longer foolishly linked their misfortune to her own happiness. She had realized that true happiness is not gained through comparison with others, but is only achieved when one lives one's own life fully. Returning home, MDM Tan prepared dinner with her husband. It was a simple but healthy meal, made with fresh vegetables from her garden. Darling Li Ying says she has severe morning sickness and can't eat anything, but she enjoys the tomatoes I sent her. That's good. I should go pick more for her tomorrow. The couple smiled gently at each other. The storm had passed. Tough new skin had grown where the wounds had healed. MDM Tan now knew. The most radiant moments in life are not dazzling weddings or flaunting success to others. This ordinary, quiet daily life, eating with loved ones, asking about each other's well-being, and eagerly awaiting the future, this was the most brilliant happiness. A soft evening glow settled outside the window. MDM Tan gazed at the scene, feeling deep peace and gratitude. Her life now had strong roots that would not be shaken by any false glitter.